Okay. A warm welcome, everyone, to our eHealth Learning podcast, a space where we encourage the sharing of knowledge and the support that brings. Thank you all for joining us. At Embodied Health Learning, we are passionate about sharing inspiring, educational, and accessible content with everyone. That's why our podcasts are free to listen to, because we believe uplifting knowledge should be available to all. If you find value in our work and want us to keep going, please consider making a donation. You can find the button on our podcast page on our website at www.ehealthlearning.tv. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us to continue to offer these resources to the wider community. Many thanks to all those who have chosen to support us. If you are not already aware, we have a very interesting and broad subject collection of topics in our back catalogue. Please take a look. For today's podcast, I've invited Kate Magic, author, retreat leader, educator on the raw food movement, functional nutritional therapist, Reiki practitioner, yoga teacher, quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner, and DJ on London Soho Radio. If you have any questions for Kate as the conversation progresses, do put them in the chat box. We are happy for you to interject, but we'll also aim to leave about 10 minutes or so at the end to answer anything that might come up around the topic. Okay, so Kate, welcome and thank you for agreeing to this conversation today. How are you and where are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very well, thank you. And I'm in Bali right now.
Wow. You mentioned that there's been a storm there.
And, wow, storm is 3 days non-stop of rain.
Wow. So that
Yeah.
kind of makes us feel a little bit better here in
Yeah.
England.
You can definitely feel comforted, yes.
That's great. So, in true rave tradition, let's see what unfolds. Before we take a deep dive into the scene through your book, which I have here, 88, The Untold Story of a Revolution, could you give us some context of how the rave scene manifested and why?
Hmm. Well, I wondered the same thing myself for a long time. I was a teenager when it all happened, and I just left home. And so I had no responsibilities. I was very young. I was very naive, which I think was actually, a plus. Um, and yeah, I just totally immersed myself in the whole thing. And obviously, it was a movement that kind of, feel it was like a flash of energy. It really happened really fast and became this kind of global phenomenon, but very much in the UK, just it felt like at some point like everyone was going out raving at the weekend, or everyone of a certain age anyway. And then very quickly, it became from an underground thing to a mainstream thing, and really created the foundation of dance music culture as we know it in the UK and across the world now. But obviously, the intensity of that period, which my book goes from 87 to 92, the intensity of that period was quite short-lived. And so from about 1992, I started trying to integrate and kind of, figure out what I was doing with my life as a young person, and kind of always wondered, and I think it's important to say as well that our memory and how we relate to information now is so different because we have the internet. And pre-internet, we kind of stored information differently in our brains. So when it happened, and then there was almost a collective, amnesia is not quite the right word, but there was a collective kind of agreement from a lot of people, like, oh, well, that happened and that was in the past, and now we're going to get on, with normal life. And it's taken a long time, I think, obviously, when we've been 2008, there was a lot of stuff started coming out, 20 years of rave. Is that right? Or 10 years? 10 years of rave. No, 20 years. 20 years of rave. I'm good with words. I'm not very good with numbers. Um, but it took really 20 years for people to start kind of even asking the question, what was it all about and what happened? Because I think it was so culturally shifting and in a way that isn't easy to just kind of put, we live in a very abbreviated culture where people like you have to have a 15-second video, right? And this is something which I feel deserves like whole university courses. It deserves like many more books from all different angles and aspects. And I don't think it's something that you can just neatly say, this is what it was. It's yeah, I mean, obviously we can spend an hour talking about different aspects of it. But I think that's partly why it it wasn't and also because my book is about the revolutionary aspect of it. And like I say, as a young person without really anything to lose, I was very much aware and involved in the underground aspect of thing. And when the story did start being told, it was more the overground side of it, and it was about the superstar DJs and the super clubs. And there was a lot of books and documentaries, and not to denigrate any of them because they all are valuable in telling the story. They all focused on the same people, and it would be the same 10 people that you would see in all the documentaries. It was mostly men. You would get maybe Lisa Loud and Nancy Noyes being trotted out, but it was mostly white men, and ones who'd made a corporate successful career out of it, rather than, I was involved in people that we'd never made money out of it, and or maybe were there at every rave and every dance floor, but never made a job out of it. So those were kind of those stories are more interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think the kind of scrapbook way you've managed to, get anecdote as well as pictures, as well as, it really leans into the fact that it was a collective
Mm,
experience.
mm,
I think I was introduced to, oh, I went to my first rave in 89, possibly nine, yeah. And it was a coming together and people would come and offer what they could offer. So I
mm,
remember making banners, out of tie-dyed sheets, and someone would turn up with a sound system and someone else. So there wasn't, it was a kind of, people would arrive together, and I was doing this in Norfolk. So um, it was like, it was different to going clubbing.
mm,
There was something very, um, new and authentic about it, kind of
mm,
appearing to be outside. So you'd find a location that was abandoned or, could hold quite a few people. Um, and everyone would come. As soon
mm,
as they would be the kind of the special little notes or, the cars in the Sainsbury's car park waiting for a telephone call, because there wasn't this, like you say, pre-internet, you couldn't, someone would get the message via a phone box and then tell everyone else in the car park where we were going, you know.
mm,
And then that
mm.
had its own, already it had started before we'd even got there.
Mm.
So yeah.
And also, as I said, I was very young, and so I didn't. Part of the reason for writing the book was I couldn't remember a lot of things. But what I realized in doing all the interviews is that a lot of times we didn't know where we were going because you just were following a car. So the fact that I can kind of vaguely remember being in a field and not knowing where the field was, that was all part of the experience because you just followed the convoy. And a lot of times you didn't know what county you were in or where you'd ended up because you were all just, going along for the experience.
Yeah, and the drivers of it being, this idea that everyone was kind of doing it together. And I think you kind of hinted about this kind of agreement, this unsaid agreement that everyone had because there was no commerce involved.
Mm.
It was kind of like, how art happenings happen. It
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of a sort of Andy Warhol or where artists or people are coming together to create something. We don't know what that is yet, but we know that there's a few ingredients that we need, and
Mm.
music and location. being like central to
Mm.
that experience.
Well, I think most people that were like putting on the raves, they would have been like, you know, maybe mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and they'd grown up pre-Thatcherism. So it was Thatcherism that really introduced this idea of doing everything for money and that being the sole point of, and now, in the last, what is it, 40 years, that's been taken to a whole other level where I think kids now, not necessarily, you know, voluntarily, but just because of the way of the cost of living is so crazy now, everything is about money. Like it's kind of hard for them to imagine how much freedom we had back then to do things that weren't about money. Because myself, I didn't go on unemployment benefit, but so many people I knew, just that's what they did. They had that money, and that was enough to just like, buy some tins of soup and tins of beans or whatever, and that's all you needed because you were just out raving all the time. So we weren't, I think now, as I say, I don't want to I think it's been engineered that way. It's not that everyone's decided, oh, let's make it about money, but it's very hard to live a life that isn't centered around money now because of how expensive everything is.
Yeah, and the rules, I think for me, the dance culture of rave broke me out of the rules that I didn't realize I was even in. So this kind of go to school, do your O levels, do your A levels. I mean, some people went and did degrees then, but not everyone. And so that kind of conformity, then get a job and marry,
Yeah,
have kids and all, it kind of broke something,
yeah, yeah,
and that kind of visceral experience really for me actually was quite spiritual. And
yeah.
what I really love in the book is that you've got a whole chapter, which is my favorite chapter actually, um, Cosmic Tales and Spiritual Epiphanies, because I really feel like it created the fissure that for that to come in, and the tribalness of it, sort of when you're in a community of people who are all in agreement and there's a real sense of kind of safety, and the music is
Mm,
really kind of doing something to your nervous system. So for me, finding the stack of speakers and standing by the bass, there was like, oh, here we go. That
mm,
kind of resonance with heartbeat, that
mm.
resonance with being in community, that something started to happen. I wonder, could you tell me a bit about, your experience?
Yeah, I mean that really is my driver because I love the Smiths. Um, I had the Raymond Briggs book, Where the Wind Blows, about, all being killed in the nuclear war. It was the miners' strike. That was really the mood of the time. And there's in the book, there's the picture where there's me in 87 and then me in 89. And it's like looking at two different people because it was all like we used to go to the Mud Club and it was all like very I don't say, well, maybe I could say pretentious, but it was very like you had to have a certain haircut, you had to wear a certain skirt, you had to have your bomber jacket and your DMs, and it was alternative in its way and very creative in its way as well. But it was very, I want to say austere. There wasn't a lot of colour necessarily. Definitely, always wore all black. And then, my personal story is there was the Mud Club was Philip Salon's club, and that's where people like Lee Barry and Boy George and Mark Moore used to go. And that's where we used to, try and get into. And one night we didn't get in. And so we went next door to Astoria, which was Nicky Holloway's club, The Trip, and it was just a sea of ravers, and from going from this very like I guess it was quite I don't know if judgmental is the right word as well, but it was definitely like everyone was dressing to impress, in places like the Mud and the Wag. In the story, it was completely the opposite, and everyone was sweating and everyone was wearing dungarees or shorts, and I've never found out why. But at the time, there was this dance, like this rocking back and forth dance that everyone did that just appeared at that time. I don't really know how that dance appeared. And everyone's just doing this dance. And it was just, it was, yeah. I mean, and there's so many stories like that in the book as well of people like going out as one person and then having that kind of, apocryphal night and then
Mm,
going back next week as a kind of totally different person. But I took all the song lyrics to heart. I
mm,
was very open. I'm a very open person, and I just was there absorbing it all like a sponge. And all the lyrics of like one day we'll all live together as one family in sweet harmony. You know, you got to feel good. Like all those beautiful songs. They're all in the book. Some of the lyrics, because
mm.
when you read them, I mean, it is poetry. They're really profound lyrics, a lot of them. I believed it all, and I thought, okay, we're all going to live together in sweet harmony. um, it's plot twist.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, but in that point, I would say for a good few years, I thought this was it. We were just all going to just live happily ever after, dancing in fields and being nice to each other forever. So obviously when it didn't work out like that, and some people got into harder drugs, and I do go into the criminal aspects of things in the book, and the kind of the ascent and the descent, because as I said, it happened really fast. Some people just got out of it completely and tried to get on with their lives. Some people got into harder drugs. As I said, a lot of people either sadly overdosed, died, or got put into mental institutions because they, did too many substances and didn't probably ever come back. So the dance floor started to get taken over more by the criminal elements that realized they could make money out of things. So that's when, I started to think, well, how can I take these beliefs that have been introduced to me through the magic of this scene, and how can I incorporate them into my life? So that was really the beginning of my spiritual path in doing yoga and being into holistic health and wellness, and trying to see how can I live these values, but in a way that isn't based around chemical substances, and um, just in a way that is integrated into society rather than having to be outside of it.
Yeah, and I think that sort of describes beautifully the kind of relationship with reality and like how it's not, the experience isn't necessarily a hedonistic one, which it can be when you're in with a group of people and this desire to keep it going. But actually it's, what I'm hearing is that it's accessed something in you that you didn't know that was there.
Yeah.
And when you describe every, like the hands in the air, I mean, it was literally like everyone's praising the moment, isn't it? And like I remember being in, small parties, but also big parties, and feeling that kind of euphoria, and you just catch the eye of someone who would know exactly where you were at, and then the
Yeah.
tears would come, and there was something, it was kind of like almost experiencing this thing that you'd hoped existed, and then there it was in that moment.
Right. And then also after the rave, when you were back, in day-to-day life, you could tell who'd been like touched by that experience. There
Yeah.
was again, like you didn't have to say anything, and it wasn't. I guess the clothing was a clue, but you could just tell the people that had that same experience. And like you say, you didn't even need to say anything. It was just like a glance and exchange, and you just knew that you were kind of in on this secret together.
Yeah, and that I think, certainly for my, nervous system, I needed that healing in my nervous system because
Yeah.
I think I grew up, in the whole nuclear disarmament age. I think
Mm.
every generation has their anxiety. and you carry that collective anxiety because you think the end of the world is coming. There's
Yeah.
something about the way the news is, and we're particularly in that now, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so that experience gave me hope that there is something else, and
Mm,
that when people are genuinely, authentically coming together. And I think there's something quite primal about dance and people dancing together. I don't know how you feel, but that kind of shared experience that we are praising something more than
mm,
ourselves.
mm. Well, I love the Hakim Bey. He's a philosopher and he has this phrase temporary autonomous zone. And that's what the dance floor is. So a temporary autonomous zone is a place where the normal societal rules are kind of suspended.
Mm.
So a dance floor, you don't know if the person you're dancing with is a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a road sweeper or a checkout person or a plumber, or it just doesn't matter because you're just bodies in a sea of bodies.
Mm.
And that I think is, what you're getting at as well is that experience that we hadn't experienced before because it was all much more like, well, what is the label of who you are? And we experience that joy of just being free in our bodies and just like, oh, I can just be. That was such a liberation, wasn't it? To just be like, oh, I can just be me in my body and I don't have to know who I am. I can just love and be happy.
Yeah, and I think liberation is the word, I think you expressed that brilliantly because, it's like the liberation to love yourself, to love that person over there that I don't even know,
Mm,
that there was this kind of, yeah, all the rules of kind of exchange, this whole, just completely obliterated. And
mm,
then if the kind of arduous journey that the DJ would take you on. So you start in a particular place, and then if he's reading the room or she's reading the room, you're then taken to this absolute. You're taken to the top of the mountain,
mm,
and then you're brought down again. And then
mm.
hopefully that's just about when the sun's going to rise and you get to
Yeah,
experience the whole kind of the cycle of nature in that as well.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like a silly story, but I think it really kind of sums a lot of things up. So Spiral Tribe had a MC called MC Scallywag, and he would just, ad lib on the mic. And one time he was he was saying, "Anyone got any Ribena?" And he was doing a little thing about Ribena because for some reason Ribena was the rave drink,
Yeah.
and but it was like so. I'm bringing that up because people would just share Ribena like that's so you can't imagine that happening like in a London club, right? Someone just offering you, you'd be a bit suspicious, wouldn't you, now if that happened? But everyone was just sharing Ribena. But then also what happened out of that story was that someone then another brave came up to him and said, "Can you do the Ribena one?" And so it became one of his like things that he did when he was doing his ad libs. Anyone got a Ribena? Anyone got a Ribena? Because that just kind of sums up the kind of um I guess it's I want to say unity consciousness, but that makes it sound profound, which it is profound, but it's the like simplicity and um the accessibility of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the innocence is kind of
Yeah,
like, there's you're describing a purity of something.
yeah,
In that moment, there's a sort of very pure exchange, isn't there, of this, of what genuine kind of interest in everyone's well-being. Because
yeah.
actually, if you've been dancing for 7 hours, you definitely need a drink, don't you? It's like everyone's making sure that you're hydrated. Have you
Yeah.
had so that kind of care and generosity. And I don't know about you, but what I found as a girl, as a woman, to be in that environment was different to a club because I wouldn't get any male attention. It was an absolute delight to not get hassled,
Mm.
and just to be able to dance. So to be, the whole, it was about going and dancing, and
That's what I'm saying is, at the clubs I've been going to before, you had to wear, we didn't have to, but you always wore a little tiny skirt and you had lots of makeup on and tons of hairspray. We had Elnet and you'd use like half a can of Elnet on your hair to make it like into the shape that you wanted. I mean, literally, I'm not even exaggerating, half a can of hairspray. And then, rave came along and we were all wearing the same. Guys and gals, we were all wearing the same. It was dungarees, kickers, t-shirts, hoodies. And, it wasn't there, it was just, yeah, it was that thing of just being a body and it didn't matter what body you were in, you were just all welcomed together.
yeah, and that's it's just so rare,
Mm,
isn't it? That kind of experience.
mm,
Um, yeah, and remember kind of that you were talking about anyone turning up, actually where we were, quite a lot of football hooligans got into it as well, because it's quite a violent time, like you talked about the miners' strike, and we had a
mm,
little football violence in our city, and
mm,
actually it just neutralized everything. It was the
mm,
most incredible experience that the dance floor became this kind of field of
mm.
equanimity. Um, yeah, which was extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. And racism as well. So this isn't from the book, but Fabio and Groove Rider tell a story that they started DJing because as black men they couldn't get into the clubs in London. They were turned away as black men. So they started DJing so that they could get into the clubs to pull the girls. But so the whole way that and this is something I do go into the book, which I really understood from doing the research and doing all the interviews, is that Caribbean sound system culture is foundational to rave culture, and without the input of that generation, the Windrush generation, they came over, they were setting up the sound systems, their children were growing up at those house parties, and their children were the ones that then set up the rave sound systems because they knew the importance of creating a room, of getting the sound right, and yeah, making it more about a whole atmosphere, a whole kind of coming together. Um, and yeah, that was really societally transformational as well, I think.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing in that also is describing church, bringing church, into these parties, and
Mm,
that essential kind of element of, the togetherness that happens
mm,
in church and a spiritual encounter,
mm.
this praising something other than ourselves.
Yeah, 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 which is not what happens maybe it happens in pockets. I'm sure it does happen in pockets, but mainstream dance culture now is is not that.
Definitely not. Yeah, so it's interesting. I find it really interesting that, that Ray really offered, or that um, moment in time really offered a kind of way into some kind of faith journey for
Mm,
people, like you say, whether it's through kind of movement and yoga, just breathing,
mm,
something, because the church had become quite inaccessible, I think, in Western culture, because of all the rules and regulations. But actually, this kind of relationship could be discovered on the dance floor, and that kind of purity of relationship with faith or whatever. I
mm,
think it certainly started something in me,
mm,
kind of like, oh yeah, I'm not the center of the universe, actually.
mm,
There's all of these other things around me that are supporting us, like the cosmos and, energy. What's the energy that's kind of coming in here? What's this feeling,
mm,
in relationship to everything else? So that, yeah, it just helped me to kind of broaden my understanding of how we fit in and maybe
mm.
where we belong.
Yeah, I think it's
About
talked a lot as well, for obvious reasons, about how DJ culture was really born out of that time, and there wasn't really you couldn't really be a professional DJ in 1987. There was a few, but but not many. And the whole thing of being a DJ and certainly having DJs' names on flyers and the whole superstar DJ thing, that all came out of that time. But I think if anyone did the research and looked into it, I think you would find that there would be a parallel between how many probably more female-centered population demographic became yoga teachers and healers and got into holistic wellness practices because of coming through that time and then wanting to not just live a mainstream life, live a corporate life, and wanting to do something different with their lives. I think you would find that there was a parallel growth in the industry, which is a less direct, the DJ thing is a very obvious industry that grew out at that time. But I think you could easily, if someone did the research, make the same more indirect parallel with holistic wellness, because there wasn't yoga studios. I mean, they're literally, I didn't know of a yoga studio in London in 1990, but that was it. It wasn't. So you can't just say it was because of rave. It's broader than that. But I think a lot of people, if you spoke to women who are in their 50s and 60s now, they would say, oh yes, I decided to take that career path because of the experiences I had at that time in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it was so outside normal
Mm,
conventions, wasn't it?
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
And
it was hard to go back in and just, obviously a lot of people did. But if you were immersed in it like I was, it was very hard to then just integrate back into normal society, because you experience something so radically different.
yeah, so how did you? How was that?
Um, Thank you for asking that. It was definitely a process. I went to so I was a kid, as I said, when it all kind of kicked off. Um, so I actually didn't finish I did my A levels. I just did stop going to college. Still got my A levels. Still got an A in English.
Well done.
Um, and so I went to university. I went to university in 1994, I think. And yeah, that I guess that was, it was actually probably quite an easy transition because I was so young. I could kind of start my life from that point.
Mm,
Um, then I think that's also why I immersed myself in it so fully, because had I been even 5 years older, I would have already had a sense of identity and had already started to build something of my life. But I just was at that point where I was really just like, yeah, so much a sponge. Um, so yeah, there was nothing stopping me, absolutely nothing stopping me just living it 24/7.
And I can see that through the list of kind of your accreditations, you've obviously, it's been quite a journey, and one thing is leading kind of to another, isn't it? And all of the traditions that you're accruing in order to then offer, because you're offering these services now, aren't you? And really
Yeah,
kind of helping support people in their journey.
yeah.
It's incredible. And I'm always interested, it's a little bit like the source of a river. If you've ever visited the source of a river, I live at the source of the Waveney in Norfolk. And, it's just like this tiny little nothing. It's
Mm,
like you wouldn't even know that it was in anything, but
mm,
then as it kind of progresses, it just gets
mm,
bigger and bigger, and it's obviously being pulled by the sea, in some ways, and it's sort of graduating and growing. So that kind of ability to be able to, not be stuck in one job, or this idea of you have you go and get a job, and then you spend however many years doing that, and then you retire and that's your life you know
mm,
actually these kind of events and moments in time can really help you to kind of go, oh, okay, actually there's quite a few things I'm good at, that
Mm.
interests me or that I could offer, so that you get this kind of whole complex sort of, yeah, job. It's not just one thing.
Multi-dimensional.
Yeah, which is kind of the same as how the whole culture is, really, isn't
Mm.
it? It's talking the same language in a way.
Yeah.
I think an artist, Jeremy Deller, I'm really interested in Jeremy Deller's work, and he did a project of taking kind of rave culture into schools.
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen any of his, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
what was it called? Oh, Everyone in the Place,
Mm. Yeah.
sort of a rave history. And
Yeah.
I think he kind of describes that really well in those, and that it gives maybe younger generations of, because there's a kind of uprising, isn't there, in a way? We kind of hit a wave of nostalgia around the history of rave right now. And whether
Mm.
that's because we're becoming, where we've got to a particular age, but I
Mm.
think, certainly I imagine, like my grandkids are going to start listening to that music.
Mm.
And then how does that imprint onto them, and new generations?
That was a lot of the reason I wrote the book as well. I mean, I think, I don't think, maybe I say it in the book, or maybe I was just kind of saying it in the promotional material, but it wasn't really written as to be a nostalgia fest. And I think there are a lot of books that do that really well. And my book wasn't about like trying to create a timeline and trying to document things and be like, it was like this, because I think, we talk about the fallibility of memory. And on a personal level, like I was trying to remember what happened, but it's still really unclear to me. And people will be like, oh, yeah, we were there in 1992. And I'm like, are you sure? I thought that was 1990. It just
Yeah.
still kind of doesn't all quite add up in my head. But a lot of who I wrote it for was for like my son's generation, for the next generation, to try and help them understand the feeling of what that was to be there. Because, like I say, and especially in the last few years, there's been some brilliant books come out, like the Mark Harrison from Spiral Tribe. He wrote his story. Um, Ed Gillett, his book Party Lines. That's a really brilliant book. He wasn't there actually. He's a bit younger, and he just did the research. But he's written a really brilliant book about more about politics and how politics and rave kind of integrate or intersect. Um, but yeah, I think part of what happened, and again, I would say it was engineered, is that we we kind of buried the importance of that time and how much it meant to us, because there was maybe to do with the drugs, and there was maybe guilt or shame around it. And it's like, okay, well, we have to kind of put that to one side and get on with being good capitalists now.
Yeah.
And so it's really forgotten, but obviously it's not forgotten. That's why we're having this conversation right now. And when YouTube started, one of the things you would find all over YouTube was people putting up rave videos, and then all the comments, like people like, oh, that was the best time of my life. And so it lives in our hearts for sure. But I don't think, as a historical moment, as a cultural moment, I don't think it's been given its proper place in our cultural history still. So that's the biggest thing I wanted to do, was try and convey to the next generation the importance of that time in that. Because how can you build culture when you don't know what's gone before? They're kind of missing the context of that. And that's partly why I think there's a lot of reasons why we have quite a vapid empty culture currently. Obviously, I don't need to start going into that, because we're all aware of how things have changed. But yeah, I think that is one of the reasons, is that we were given the 60s as a kind of data point, right? It's like, oh, the hippies and free love and marijuana and Woodstock, and that was our data point. We had punk as a data point, so anarchy in the UK, and spitting on TV. I don't know, but we had those data points to be like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do with that information that's gone before,
Mm.
and that I don't think they have the correct set of data for what happened in the 80s and early 90s to then build on that and decide what they want to do with that and where they want to take that.
Yeah. And I think you sort of signpost a really important kind of way of how history is viewed and who tells history, because, you know, it can always be the more sensational kind of facts come through. So, there was so much more to that period of time than what drugs people were taking. It's kind of like, okay, it was part of that, but it wasn't the whole part of that. There
Mm.
was so much more. And at its essence, it was about people really having a lovely time.
Mm.
And I think people really searched for having a lovely time and what was that and yeah, how are we going to do it?
Mm.
How are we going to do it?
Face was their emblem because I mean, again, it doesn't. It's unless you were alive in the 70s and 80s, it sounds mad to say it, but we didn't know we were allowed to be happy.
Mm,
We literally didn't know we were allowed to be just happy,
mm,
and that's what it made us realize is, oh, we can be happy, and that's what I'm saying is, as much as rave culture and dance music culture came out at that time, so did well-being culture, because we realized on a profound level, oh, I'm entitled to feel good in my body, I'm entitled to feel sovereign in my body, and I'm entitled to just feel good about myself, because there was, I mean, yeah, I won't, I won't start talking about the darkness of the 70s and 80s, but in terms of, all the stuff that's very current in the moment about news, how
yeah.
much, people like Jimmy Savile were like, he wasn't obviously just isolated, but he's very representative of how culture was at that point, and how abusive, I would say, a lot of, not everyone, but there was much more abuse, like, stitched into the fabric of our lives, that we didn't even realize it was abuse, because it was just what our normal lives were.
Mm. Yeah, so this, the smiley face is a really good connotation of the, yeah, finding out that actually you're not a nutter if you smile, because I really remember that. It was like, look at that mad person over there smiling. People would criticize you. How absurd. But I think what you're talking about, the kind of backstory of the culture of what, the reaction to that was kind of like, yeah, there was a lot of oppression at that time and a lot of secrets, and people didn't talk about stuff, and everyone was so socially kind of bound up in what was acceptable. And this just blew the lid off
Yeah.
the whole thing, and it obviously needed it. So one could even say that it's a precursor for the truth seeking that's kind of happening now.
Oh yeah, I believe so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, to come back to the point of naivety, because there's a whole section in the book on naivety, I think that really was one of our superpowers, is
Mm.
our naivety. And we literally, I would say 90, maybe even 95% of people that were at the raves literally were just going to have a good time and to smile and be happy with their friends. And it was no more, no less than that. It was just that pure, innocent thing. The establishment, the authorities, on the other hand, saw what a threat people being happy together was to society, and that's why they slammed down so hard on it. And we were so shocked. There's a whole chapter in the book on police brutality, because we didn't understand how much of a threat to society we were, by just smiling and being happy, and they really understood. And that's why, that it's very publicly documented that the orders to quash the raves came from, right at the top, right from the cabinet.
Yeah, and that's the revolution that you're describing, isn't it?
Yeah, because there was this brief period, which was so brief. I would say it was maybe 88, 89, 90, when we really were getting away with it, because the quashing hadn't begun. Like, when was the criminal justice bill? 1994, was it? 1992? So that's when they brought in the law that says you're not allowed to assemble and listen to repetitive beats. Obviously, very successful law, that one. Um, but there was a good, I would say, well, it was three, some of the love, don't they say, 88, 89, 90, where we really were getting away with it because the police hadn't quite realised what was going on and they hadn't quite been given the orders from above to start, with the brutality that did start happening in 91, 92. And so there's lots of stories of people saying, the police would come to the raves and just be, happy and then finish their shift, go home, get changed, and come back and join the rest of the party.
I mean, that's just the best result, isn't it? Because it was non-threatening. That
Hmm.
was my experience, is that it was a non-threatening,
Was
happening. And people are just
that's
literally,
why paradox is that's why it was a threat.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, because they could see that something was happening, to youth culture, didn't they?
Yeah.
That actually, there was, yeah, this draw. Yeah, very scary for the authorities. And a lot of kind of untruths were said about it at the time. I remember, it's kind of like, like you say, we were just having a party, you know, nothing more than that. Nothing is happening. No one's getting hurt, And yeah, there was a time where it was accepted, which was quite extraordinary.
Mm.
Even the
Mm.
convoys of cars, amazing to be within that and it being, yeah, this amazing, yeah, experience because it was happening.
Yeah.
Gosh. So I just want to thank you for writing this book because I think it's a really important, and for me, what I love is the fact that it's like a scrapbook. Did you used to keep scrapbooks? Every ticket of every gig I went to, went into this funny little scrapbook. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy how you can kind of pick and choose in here, flip, and there's a beautiful anecdote and a lovely story. And I think it encapsulates, yeah, the memory without it being the nostalgia. It's kind of like, oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
was
I
really,
feel like an annual, when you get your Christmas annual.
yes,
Yeah, I did it to be like an annual. Your
yeah.
blue people are loyal.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful production, and I really hope that lots of people, get this annual for their Christmas presents because it's brilliant. It's a fantastic read, and look at those colours. I mean, I found this top in the charity shop yesterday, and I was like, oh, I've got to wear that tomorrow. So it just takes me back, just like when I listen to one of the tracks, like one of the biggies,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's in my body. I'm just there again, experiencing. I feel like that has been a positive imprint on my system,
Yeah.
because of the joy and the freedom and the movement that I experience in my body. And I'm sure I'll be like one of those raving grannies,
Oh yeah.
as I get older, Yeah, what a magic time. Magic time. Yeah, so has anyone got any questions as we're heading towards the end of the conversation? Thank you for joining us. So what I'd like, if no one's got any questions, what I'd really like to do to end the session is there's a beautiful well, they, like you say, some of the songs were like it's like poetry, isn't it? And towards the end of the book, you've got a couple of postcards which kind of give a synopsis, really, of the message of the
Yeah.
time. And if it's okay with you, I'd really like to read
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. So, um, you've got in the book, you've got all the songs written down, but there was one yeah, that absolutely struck me. So, let's look for a better way. Let's look for a brighter day. Only then will we know what we've always wanted to show. It's you who holds the vital key. Look around and then you'll see. God surrounds us everywhere, love and light for us to share. Know your brother, trust each other, respect for all, we cannot fall. Higher and higher we shall rise. Our only goal will be the skies. Practice the truth here now to be found. Heaven on earth is where we are bound.
That's so special for you to read that out, because I would literally have been like 16 when I wrote that poem, and I had a pager. It was before obviously mobile phones, and I had a pager, and I had it written. I don't have its remains of a piece of paper, but I had it printed out on a piece of paper with my pager number on it. And so if people wanted my pager number, I would give them that poem.
I mean, it's just so relevant. It's so relevant, and that, that it's just come from your heart, because something has affected you, and this is what's coming out. It's a beautiful sharing, and I'm going to stick that on my fridge.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so
No,
special.
thank you. I think, yeah, I'm very touched by it. So, yeah, and thank you for taking the time today, Kate, for yes, yeah, making the time for this conversation in your busy schedule.
Oh, my pleasure, really.
It's just been really, yeah, fantastic. So, if it's okay with you, we'll end the conversation there.
Maybe just to end by saying that I the book, I started writing the book in 2007,
Mhm.
and I wrote that last year. And it was such a labor of love over so many years. And when it finally came out, I self-published it, and I really thought a lot when it finally came out about, why is it coming out now, and what are my intentions for it, and what do I hope to get from it? And I think more than anything, if I had to just say one thing, it is just to create more conversation,
Mm.
because I don't think there's a right way or a single way to look at it. But I think to create conversations around, what does it mean to come together in groups like that? What does music mean to us? Why was there so much police brutality, and why were the government so intent on shutting it down? What role do drugs play, for better or for worse, in our lives? Um, why was it so much a part of it to be outside and be in nature? And what does that connection to nature mean for us that's missing in so many of our lives? And just not to kind of tell people, oh, this is what you need to think about this time, but just that these are maybe the subjects and the questions that will serve us well if we bring these to the forefront of our conversations, to help us understand more, what do we want, and what do we really want from life, rather than this artificial and very constrained version of reality that we've been inhabiting for too long now.
Yeah, beautifully put. I think it's really important what you're asking. I think all of those questions are really important. And, to have the gravity, it's like, can we dare to just be honest about asking those questions? We can't be like it was in the 1970s and just brush everything under the carpet, because that's why we're where we are now, surely, for people to be a bit more daring about, um, you know, f having those questions, and there being less judgment around those questions. It's like, have we got a backbone to be able to just, yeah, have a debate about that? We don't have to agree, but actually they're really important, aren't they?
Yeah, and we're not going to do, and that's the thing as well, is that, I guess that's what I was looking for when I started writing the book, was some kind of consensus,
Mm.
and I didn't get it.
Mm.
because everyone had a different story to tell. And my parameters were, these 4 or 5 years in London. I did a little bit of Brighton and Manchester, but everyone was in the same time in the same place, basically, and they all had a different story to tell. So we should all have a different story to tell. We shouldn't all be thinking the same things. We should all have different perspectives on it. But it's by bringing, like you say, our authentic perspective and then sharing with others. That's how we really evolve from where we are now, I think.
Yeah, and that's for the common good, isn't it? I think that then becomes a kind of a bit more of a less, yeah, we're not so kind of structured to have to fit into a box, because so many of us maybe have that issue with trying to comply and fit into this particular box that we just don't fit in, and that's been the kind of, the disaster of shutting people, it's like to be expressive and to have that creative input and to have your sovereignty around your opinion in regards to being open to someone else's is a real skill and an art, isn't it, that needs to be fostered and enhanced and encouraged. And I think your book really, I think the book, well, for me, it's touching on that, definitely. So, let's see what grows. How brilliant.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for your time, and I hope our paths cross at some point in time. I'd really like
Yes,
that.
yes. And can I just plug the book? It's on Bandcamp and Amazon. Uh,
Fantastic.
so yeah, maybe we can put links in the description. And there's loads of audio podcasts, some of the original interviews that I did, and then some newer ones as well. So there's a whole podcast series to listen to and some video interviews as well. So lots of source material to.
Fantastic. And I'd encourage anyone to check into that and take a deep dive, because it's the most interesting and enlightening time. Yeah, fantastic. Kate, thank you so much today. All right, my love. Safe trip back to the UK.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care now.